Hello and most welcome to 1849 of the H series. We will today continue with Warren Goldfarb's Rule Following Revisited. Last time was rather extensive. We questioned Dummett's position of conventionalism, and we also looked into how we can get into this problem. I think one of the most interesting features of Wittgenstein is that he also wants to explain how we come into the position that we're in. So he's wide apart from philosophers. He wants to give us a reasonable explanation for the present understanding, how we got there, so to speak, and then with his at least three voices, he offers alternatives. So we are perpetually at liberty to accept the one that sort of speaks to us, that makes sense. And I would say that is in rather sharp contrast to everyday rationality that is on the verge of being aggressive almost, to threatening with science. Those are the facts. You need to obey them almost. They decide that everything is determined and caused. Go look for the original, whether it's the original Bible text or an atom. There is a simple underlying authority somehow in ordinary speech that Wittgenstein does not have. He is more the voice of a friend. And he doesn't stuff one view into one's throat. We always have a choice, and of course, this is also one of the reasons why Wittgenstein is so incredibly hard to read. Coping with different viewpoints in one text simply doesn't happen otherwise. When reading a text, I usually can find some sort of tendency only after a couple of pages where it's going, so to speak. In Wittgenstein, it's much more open-ended, subtle, softer, less menacing, less aggressive. We also brought up the private language argument, PLA for short. PLA as we mentioned last time, doesn't take away the possibility to have private thinking in the normal sense. PLA is more what establish a groundedness in reality. Well, if you like, PLI questions the rigidness and menacing threat of the ordinary view. You need to accept this, it's almost saying, ordinary common sense rationality. This is how it is. I think, this is my personal view, that fear in a very subtle way has connection to ordinary rationality. The sheer mass of people who are in on it is also very important and strengthening. Making it almost impossible to question. Because we don't even know what it is. But reading Wittgenstein, we get hope. I really liked that he compared metaphysical view with the idea that already before it has happened, that we should know where things are going, where the number series next step is going to be. But I would say that is our habit. We are habituated. And that, my friends, is not the same as being present, being an individual and taking responsibility for one's own thinking, understanding. It's a doorway to liberty. Further up on that page is a quote on the second paragraph that is well worth retaking. At the very end of the second paragraph, Wittgenstein is here. Let's see, now you got to the first paragraph. See, that's the end of the second one there. Wittgenstein is here eliciting the idea that what we are truly bound to do in following the rule is that for which there would be a full and ultimate justification of its being the correct continuation. So the rule is something that is already out there. I'd say in some cases it's Platonic. It has always existed, will never cease to exist. And it's a priori there. So it's an afterthought that is applied before. It is the explanation part of the language game that gets confounded with what actually happens. I think that is pretty close to ordinary language or talking in a simple tone. Yes, it's still very complicated. But this can be understandable. And we will now continue the read where I left off in 1847. It's towards the end of this page. The first occurrence of a consideration like this comes in paragraph 87, where Wittgenstein asks, but then how does an explanation help me to understand if, after all, it is not the final one? In that case, the explanation is never completed. So I still do not understand what he means. And never shall. Wittgenstein is there pushing the picture of justification to the point at which one will not be able to get satisfaction. He responds to this as follows. As though an explanation, as it were, hung in the air unless supported by another one. Whereas an explanation may indeed rest on another one that has been given. but none stands in need of another. Unless we require it to avoid a misunderstanding. One might say an explanation serves to remove or prevent a misunderstanding. One that would arise if not for the explanation, but not every misunderstanding that I can imagine. One particular aspect of the general picture of justification and doubt connects with the question of the role of practices in the rule following considerations. Let us go back to the paradox of paragraph 201 and let us once again retrace how it can operate to move us to radical conventionalism or skepticism. We give a rule, and in some cases, in its application, perhaps a further explanation of the rule. But for all that, Wittgenstein says, one could go on in different ways and yet take oneself to be doing the same thing. Because of this, we seem to be in a position of admitting that we cannot say what going on in the same way is by means of the rule or an explanation. Here we get the idea that I cannot represent at all what I understand by going on in the same way. I cannot represent it because any representation I give is just one more explanation and can leave matters up in the air in just the same way. That leads to the paradox. Nothing works to give us how to go on. So in principle, we cannot be bound by anything. In this, it appears that what I want is something that explains how to go on, what the correct continuation is. Not something that in fact works to explain to some person how to go on. Usually, I give you examples and you will go on. Or I will tell you various things about how to go on, and you will go on. But that is not what we wanted when we were in this mood. Wittgenstein points out that there are many ways of going on. So we are inclined to conclude that we need something that picks out the correct continuation, but not in the way that our explanations in ordinary life pick it out. We do not want something that gets people to go on in the right way, but something that absolutely picks out for any possible audience the right continuation from all the possible continuations. Now, in a certain context, there might be a question. If I give you the series 3, 5, 7, and ask you to go on, you may go on 9, 11, 13, 15, 17. Or you may go on 11, 13, 17, 19. That is the difference between the odds and the primes. Two different rules, my parenthesis. Here we can say what we mean by going on in the same way. I can say, I meant that you should go on by giving odds, not primes. And then you can go on in the same way. If you were wrong in a particular case, I could say how you were wrong. And I can justify to another person why I say that you were wrong. What is the driving matters for the interlocutor is that he wants to know how I might justify any claim that I might make that something has gone wrong in any way in which the rule follower might operate. He wants something in which the pupils going wrong, really consisted. A determination of going on the same such that any imaginable way of going on was either included or excluded. The interlocutor wants an account addressed to someone whose responses we are not depending. As Cora Diamond has put it, we want an account that will suffice when we are not allowed to depend upon the fact that the learner is a human being. An account that makes clear how it is fixed out of all possible continuations, which is the one we are meant to obey. That is the picture of justification that is under attack. And that is the way of reading the lesson of the paradox. To conclude that, since there are other possibilities, the notion of rules determining how to go on is undermined, is to accept the picture of ultimate binding that Wittgenstein attacks. What is under attack is the idea that there is some road for such explanations. and that rule following is somehow ungrounded unless we get such an account all this is going on in 213. But this initial segment of a series could obviously be variously interpreted. And so you must first have chosen one such interpretation, not all. That is already a bad picture. Just because certain things were possible, it does not follow that you must have chosen a certain interpretation. Wittgenstein then remarks, a doubt was possible in certain circumstances, but that is not to say that I did doubt or even could doubt. He is making a connection here between a circle of ideas, doubt, justification, explanation, and the factor that is moving the paradox concerning the matter of needing to choose an interpretation to single out the right course of action from all of the possibilities. He is saying that the mere presence of alternative continuations and so the mere conceivability of doubt as how to go on does not imply that there is doubt or that doubt needs to be ruled out or that a justification need be given. there may be no doubt about how to go on. No need for explanation, and hence no real alternatives. What he is warning against is to look for a kind of explanation that does not rely on the responses of the other. Here, it is apposite to quote a passage from the Remarks on the Foundations of Mathematics 6, paragraph 17. That is highlighted and discussed in Cora Diamond's Realism and the Realistic Spirit. I can train someone in a uniform activity. For instance, in drawing a line like this with a pencil on paper. Line dot dot, line dot dot, etc. Now I ask myself, what is it that I want him to do then? The answer is, he is always to go on as if I have shown him. And what do I really mean by he is always to go on in that way? The best answer to this that I can give myself is an example like the one I have just given. I would use this example in order to show him and also to show myself what I mean by uniform.
Uniform.
We talk and act. That is already presupposed in everything that I am saying.
Saying.
That is exemplary of the idea that in talking about explanations, we are really talking about explanations relying on the uptake of others. For there is no non-question begging other way to explain more fully. That is the essence, as I see it, of the rule following sections. I hope this begins to give some sense to reliance on practice that we should want to articulate in what the rule following comes to. In paragraph 206, Wittgenstein says, shared human behavior, die gemeinsame menschliche Handlungsweise, is a system of reference by means of which we interpret an unknown language. The system of reference. Again, this is to lead us away from the idea of practices as constituting correctness of individual rules. It is by reference to the complete totality of the ways we have of dealing with each other that anything one wants to say about rule following will have any sense.
any sense.
Wittgenstein means all of the background. All of how we deal with each other. Once one starts including enough in practices and into institutions to merit the term gemeinsame menschliche Handlungsweise, it should become clear that practices and institution cannot play the role cannot play the kind of constitutive role that the interlocutor was after. Påfridig. The category is too broad. There's too much in it. Much in it is not germane to any one particular rule, but to our behavior in general. Moreover, it already incorporates rule following and so cannot be its ground. And ground be a stopping part here. Be its ground a bit longer. I'll just $25. Today is the 7th of the 10th. Just put a little pause here and start. Okay, let's look at this. The short version of the whole thing is that this means the refutal of. It would be very helpful for the Brazilian philosopher, politician Roberto Unger and the scientist Lee Smolin to have a little bite of Wittgenstein through the keen and sharp discrimination of Warren Goldfarb. It is exactly the pre-made rules that governs anything, everything and anything that is here under attack. That there will be pre-made rules. We are talking classical physics, determinism, the sense of doom that happened to the thermodynamics scientists in the end of the 19th century, when the second law of thermodynamics made them so depressed. In their thinking, it meant the inevitable deterministic end of the universe. So although it sounds like something very thin in the text here, it's incredibly decisive in the end. We'll go back a bit here and we'll have a look at page 85, if you may, Kalle. This time we go in more into explanations and how they can put everything in danger. If you go to the top of the page here, the second paragraph, there is a quote. As though an explanation, as it were, hung in the air unless supported by another one, is the misled idea of a need for specification, that we need to explain where things are going. We need a universal grammar, so to speak, or we need logic a priori to avoid misunderstandings, like in the example with the wayward child or the pupil. We will also would like to avoid those misunderstandings that we think can arise if rules are not enforced and explanations added. This is close to representation, as you can see further down in, that paragraph, one particular aspect paragraph, at the end of that one. Here we get the idea that I cannot represent at all what I understand by going on in the same way. And listen now. I cannot represent it because any representation I give is just one more explanation. And I can leave matters up in the air and can leave matters up in the air just the same way. Go to the next paragraph, to the end of that one. We do not want something that gets people to go on in the right way, but something that absolutely picks out for any possible audience the right continuation from all possible continuations. That is the voice of the interlocutor. This is exactly answered by the Osma problem by Ava Gardner. About chirality cannot be explained because it can be turned upside down. Any explanation we give will not add to the certainty of it being understood in the way we want. We do not have that control at all. Go to the next page. And I'm going to read after the colon, a determination of going on the same way such that any imaginable way of going on was either included or excluded. Here, in a nutshell, we have the cosmological fallacy. The idea that everything is determined and that there was a big bang that led to the classical laws, or that all human thinking is logical and caused by thinking. Thinking is the same as Big Bang, a big unknown, if you want. If we go to the 5th line of page 86, we want, as the 4th line, we want an account that will suffice when we are not allowed to depend upon the fact that the learner is a human being. Very pertinent today. We are, in fact, actually human beings. We are not AI. We are not rule-governed computers. Reality neither is a rule-governed computer. For Tegmark, for Hugh Everett, and a lot of scientists, Tim Maudlin seemed to be one of them, the whole world is a computer, and we are in this world also computers. This view is exceedingly common today. And here Wittgenstein is stripping it of all its credibility, showing its true character of being a misunderstanding. Pure and simple. And here we take a quote from Cora Diamond from her book, Realism and the Realistic Spirit. The last penultimate paragraph on the page. Just going to read one sentence. We can clear up the rest in the discussion. We talk and act. That is already presupposed in everything that I'm saying. So all this need for explanation is a misunderstanding of not knowing that everything is inside everything already. I call that here quantum relativity, or the global realism of Allan Aspect, Salinger and Clauser. Everything is interconnected, even history. It's nonsensical to have explanations because we have something so much larger. Explanations do not add to security, certainty, or knowledge. What they do is taking away that certainty, putting in uncertainty when none should be, when none could be. There couldn't be any uncertainty how we express ourselves. That's absolutely impossible. The sheer might of everything that has happened make that over clear. All of the Geschichte. You need to understand that quantum relativity means not all relations in the whole of universe at this instance. No, much more importantly, all the relations that have been and all the relations that should be. That is an enormity of much more. As if it weren't enough. I hope that I made that absolutely clear how much it is. On the next page, you will get the German name for that. I suggest that you remember that one. It's here called shared human behavior. Die gemeinsame menschliche Handlungsweise. And by that, we can interpret everything. Another way of explaining it, we want everything to be explicit since the Reformation. Outspoken. This is what Martin Luther wanted. For him, meaning was something you can talk about, an extra explanation. He already believed in the Big Bang, so to speak, and the classical laws. And he wanted to explain how we use words. It is nonsensical. I will end with the 10th line, I think, or 9th. Wittgenstein means all of the background, all of how we deal with each other. Put that on gold, put it on the fridge, put it above your bed so that it is the first thing you see in the morning and the last one you see when you go to sleep. Do not miss it. All means all. And it's an incredible amount more certainty than you get from any unnecessary explanation. It's much more than all the encyclopedias in the whole world, and yet more and more. That is absolutely decisive. Kalle, finally, come in here.
Yes. Thank you. Let me return here. So page 85. Let me read. Now, in certain contexts, there might be a question. If I give you the series 3, 5, 7, and ask you to go on, you may go on 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, the odds. Or you may go on 11, 13, 17, 19, the primes. Here we can say that we mean by going on in the same way. I can say, I mean that you should go on by giving odds, not primes. So here we have, so both ways, both odds and the primes are correct ways. If you would say to me, Hans, that you should have taken the odds, Kalle, but I went with the primes, I say, you didn't told me. So it's me, Kalle, the observer, who makes a decision. It's not that I couldn't read your thoughts, so to say. So both are appropriate. Don't you? Will you agree, Hans?
Yeah.
So I love this. Actually, this is very clear example, and I have borrowed Michio Kaku's latest book, Quantum Supremacy, 2023, and I would like to read a quotation from page 42.
Go ahead.
Einstein introduced the concept of duality, that is, light energy has a dual nature. Light could act like a particle, the photon or a wave, as in optics. Somehow, light had two possible forms. Hans, and we do know this already, but I wanted to highlight this because this is very close to quantum physics, or this is ghostly similar what Einstein is speaking here to the light wave duality. Because if you look on these lines, it looks like waves in one way, and then particles.
It does actually, yeah. There's probably no coincidence.
And we know that fractality proves that there are no straight lines. So we could interpret these so-called straight lines as waves.
Yeah, that's pretty much correct, yeah. Definitely.
So in this way, this is spokily similar to quantum physics. So let me read Wittgenstein's point here. So Wittgenstein writes, I can train someone in a uniform activity, that is in drawing a line like this with a pencil on paper. So a line, 2 dots, line, 2 dots, a line, 2 dots, and so forth. Now I ask myself, what is it that I want him to do then? The answer is always to go on as I have shown him. What do I really mean by is always to go on in that way? The best answer to this that I can give myself is an example like the one I have just given. I would use this example in order to show him, and also to show myself what I mean by uniform. We talk and act, that is already presupposed. So this is the point is here that everything depends what we are, what our premise is. I could be a child, and you teach me, Kalle, this is what is uniformity, the word uniformity means, or something like that. Although it's banal. So then you mean, but
I think a good example here that could be helpful is the Augustinian view, because it's so absurd. He takes away the whole world, that is 99.99999% of everything that exists, and he says, I learn what a table is by somebody pointing to it.
No, but I think Wittgenstein is looking here is that he wants to show what the classical physics is. We want it to be uniform with straight lines, but it's explicit. We want this uniformity, but in quantum physics, like with the light, which has a duality, But the important thing with the duality is that it's not uniform. It depends on the observer, and
the observer comes in there because the rules, so to speak. I don't know if this. I'm going to make a sort of metaphor here. If you have strict rules even for thinking, and thinking is the Big Bang, and you start go on in that way, which we all do, the observer disappears somehow. As I mentioned before, many people think that the whole world is a computer and we are in a computer in that computerized world. There is no observer anymore, but we know that's not the case. We have to decide at every moment still, and that means the observer is very active in every microsecond.
Yes, Hans, let us be very generous here and say classical physics is correct, and it's correct in one way. That is Wittgenstein's point. Classical physics is right, provided, that is, if we are out to show uniformity. Uniform things exist or seem to exist. But it's not that how things work, usually.
Yes, no, reality is, as you said, fractal. It is non-linear. We know this is something we know. This is not something I'm saying here, as I usually do. We know that everything in the world is non-linear. That is non-Newtonian. It doesn't mean that Newton can't be used, but he has nothing to do with reality.
Yes, we could say like this line here in this example. We could say, no, it's a straight line. And we want to show uniformity, but then we have to remember this really uniformity that we want to show, and now not how nature works, for instance, or fractality. It depends what your point is, so to say.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and so it depends on the observer, or you, so to say, you, Hans, you command me, you should do this. You want uniform activity. You want, like slaves in Egypt, they would do mostly uniform activity, bring stones. That's a purpose.
Yeah, purpose comes into the picture once more with Wittgenstein. It's just glorious.
And speaking of slaves, I think actually the slave metaphor is very good, because in classical physics you are actually a slave. You are following rules. You are following uniformity. While quantum physics gives you...
Kalle, please speak more into the microphone. Your words are fantastic. I want the public to hear them too.
So we could take slave metaphor is good. So in ancient Egypt, there were slaves who built pyramids. And uniformity in that case was good, because the slaves were doing a uniform work for the most, bringing stones to the pharaohs. And classical physics is like that. People are slaves under uniformity, like this. You see, straight line, two dots, straight line, two dots. While quantum physics give you freedom of thinking in uniformity, determination. Because what is then classic quantum physics? It's like this. Because you can actually choose odds instead of primes.
Yeah.
This is freedom.
That's freedom.
So this first example is actually freedom, quantum physics, the odds and the primes, while this example is what uniform example is actually classical physics.
Yeah, definitely. Very good. Well, excellent spot maybe to stop. What do you say, Kalle?
Yes, let's end here.
Okay. So, shortcut, we attacked Big Bang and classical physics, or the classical permanent laws. and also showed that the reality is immensely much more big than we can imagine or put into an explanation. Thank you very much, Kalle Lundor, for participating and for your fantastic comments. Thank you everyone for listening in. Have a very pleasant morning, day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. Bye-bye for now.